Jennifer, give me the thing to read out.
Do you have your script for the closed session? Oh, it's already in there. She updated your script.
This one? Okay.
Yep. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening. It is 7 p.m. on June 27th, 2023. Welcome to the San Marino Unified School District Board of Education meeting. And here is your board president, Shelley Ryan.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. Good evening, everyone. We just came out from closed session and I do have something that I need to read out. This is a report of closed session. The Board of Education took unanimous action in closed session to approve the settlement agreement for student number 1700. The vote is as follows. I want to do roll call vote right now. So Ms. Joanna Lam.
Aye.
Ms. Francesca Gill.
Aye.
Ms. Jane Chung.
Aye.
Mr. Joseph Chang.
Aye.
Shelley Ryan, aye. And so the motion to approve board action in closed session, agreement for student 1700 was approved. Next, there was an action item. The second one is approval of employment agreement for superintendent. The board president, sorry, tonight the board is considering the recommended approval of an employment agreement setting forth the terms and conditions for Dr. Delatorre to continue serving as superintendent of the San Marino Unified School District. Under Government Code Section 54953, requires the board prior to taking final action to provide an oral summary of a recommendation for approval on the salaries, salary schedule, or compensation paid in the form of fringe benefits of a local agency executive during the open meeting in which action is to be taken. I am providing an oral summary of the recommendation being considered by the board this evening for a new agreement. The term of agreement is 3 years, and unless notice of non-renewal is timely issued, it will automatically extend by 1 year. Superintendent's annual salary will be $262,150 to be paid in 12 monthly installments. The superintendent shall also be eligible for increases or decreases as the case may be, approved for the district management employee group, including assistant superintendents. The superintendent's work year will be 225 days. With the board's approval, the superintendent may work up to 10 additional days each fiscal year and be compensated for any such additional work days. The superintendent will be provided with sick leave and may participate in district provided health and welfare benefits to the same extent available to other district administrators. 5, the superintendent will also be provided with a monthly car allowance of $570 in lieu of mileage reimbursement for travel within Los Angeles County. The allowance may be evaluated annually based on prevailing IRS mileage reimbursement rates. District agrees to pay membership to AASA, the San Marino Rotary Club, the City Club of San Marino on behalf of the superintendent. The district also agrees to provide the superintendent with a tablet or laptop computer for her use while serving as superintendent, as well as a monthly stipend of $100 for her cellular phone for business use. Number 8, the agreement includes an early termination without cause provision. Under that provision, if the agreement is terminated unilaterally by the board without cause prior to the expiration of the agreement, the district agrees to pay the remaining unpaid salary for the term of the agreement not to exceed 12 months. Is there a motion to approve the superintendent's employment agreement.
I move to approve. I second.
Thank you, Mrs. Gill. Thank you, Mrs. Lamb. And so with that sets in motion, I'd like to do roll call vote. Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Gill,
Aye.
Mrs. Chung.
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye. And so the motion for the employment agreement passes.
Thank you.
All right, we would like to now open up the session. It is 7:06. Call to order. I'd like to do roll call. Mrs. Lamb.
Here.
Mrs. Gill.
Here.
Mrs. Chan.
Here.
Mr. Chang.
Here.
Mrs. Ryan, aye. And I'd like everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right,
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda. Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Lamb. Thank you, Mrs. Gill. And so with that, roll call, Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Gill.
Aye.
Mrs. Chong.
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye. Next, we have 5C, approval of minutes. This is the June 15th Board of Education meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the 6/15/2023 meeting minutes?
I move to approve for the minutes on the June 15, 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Chang.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Chong. Roll call, Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Gill,
Aye.
Mrs. Chong,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
I
Mrs. Ryan, aye. The San Marino Unified School District 7A is a spotlight. At this time, the Board of Education would like to recognize the Chinese Club of San Marino for their generous donation to Grad Night. So with that, I'd like to call Dr. Delatorre.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the Board of Education, executive team. It is my distinct privilege and honor to recognize the San Marino Chinese Club this evening for their contribution and donation to Grad Night 2023. In support, we have Catherine Oliveras and Debbie Cribbs, who co-chaired Grad Night this year, and it was highly successful. And we could not continue to have these wonderful programs that our children so justly deserve as a recognition and celebration of their high school career without your generous support. And I just want to express my sincerest gratitude and appreciation for your partnership in this wonderful community and all that you do to support San Marino Unified School District and our wonderful, amazing students. Thank you so much. We are so grateful to you. Alan Chen is the president, and he is here with us. And so, Catherine, I didn't know if you wanted to say a few words before we provide the certificate. No, it's no pressure. You don't have to. Debbie, you might want to come up too.
I'm not equipped for this right now. Well, I mean, you know, as we said over the weekend, grad night is the biggest probably undertaking, other than educating our kids, that this community does in any given year. And, you know, we were kind of hard pressed this year to make up for a dramatic decrease in our class size due to some shifts that happened when these kids went into TK. And the ability of the Chinese club to step in and fill some of that gap. You actually provided an entire room full of entertainment that the kids partook in all night and was filled not only with the children, but with community members to entertain them and have fun. And we absolutely could not have kept them entertained all night without your help. And we're just so grateful for everything you all do to support our kids. So thank you.
Hey, if we could get the Board of Education to come forward and get you to come on up for a photograph, we're going to present you with a. It's certificate of recognition to the Chinese Club of San Marino. It's sincere gratitude for your contributions as part of the San Marino High School grad night and your continued support of meaningful contributions. So thank you so much. My pleasure. So you want to come up here, friends? Yes.
Teresa also one while we should work.
Oh, Teresa.
I know, we know each other.
Way back. Yes, thank you for returning and for your contributions over the years. Thank you so much.
Okay. Look at the two cameras set up on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Do we want to do one here? We know you're a part of this as well. I know.
Okay, the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I could
All right, next is public comment. The Board of Education has adopted board policy 9323B to ensure the public's right to be heard in any matters pertaining to the San Marino Unified School District. Persons who wish to provide public comment will have 3 options to submit public comments. First, they may submit through an online form. And none were submitted prior to 3:30 this afternoon. Request to speak during the meeting via Zoom. Dr. Choi.
Thank you, President Ryan. We'll go ahead and pause for 1 minute to take requests to speak regarding matters that are not on the agenda or items that are in the consent information as well as action items on the agenda. So if you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. Okay, 30 seconds remain. If you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. Okay, President Ryan, we have no requests.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. Next, we could also have requests to speak during the meeting in person via the public comment card. Jennifer, are there any comment cards? Okay, there are none. Public hearing. Section 9, public hearing. At this time, I would like to turn turn it over to Dr. Michael Lin to conduct a public hearing.
Thank you, Board President Ryan, members of the Board of Education, Superintendent Dr. Delatorre, and the executive team. Item 9A is to hold a public hearing and comment for certification of the district's reserves for economic uncertainties disclosure report. Dr. Choi, let's pause for a minute to take public comments.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lin. For our Zoom audience, if you'd like to make a request to speak regarding the public hearing and comment for certification of the district's reserves for economic uncertainties disclosure report, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. Again, 30 seconds remain. If you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. Dr. Lin, we have no requests.
Thank you.
All right. This is not an action item, right, or anything, Dr. Lin? Okay. Next, we have consent section. Do I have a motion to approve the consent section A through H?
Oh, we also need to collect the card from the in-person for the public hearing.
Oh, was there, sorry, thank you. Was there a card for public hearing? Any cards? There were none at this time. All right. Thank you. Under the consent section, do I have a motion to approve the consent section A through H?
I so move.
Thank you, Mrs. Gill.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Lamb. Roll call, Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Gill.
Aye.
Mrs. Chang,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye. And so the motion to approve consent section A through H has been approved. Communication section, the communication from the Board of Education, we ask that each board member take no more than 2 to 3 minutes to share their communication. Let's begin with Mrs. Lamb.
Thank you. So on June 16th, I attended the Masters in Governance training on collective bargaining. On June 17th, I did attend another training session with Masters in Governance training for human resources. So with those 2 final classes, I am an official graduate.
Oh, bravo, bravo.
Thank you so much for everyone's mentorship in this room. I am very happy that I'm almost done with my first year as a board member. Thank you.
Congratulations. All right. With nothing else, Mrs. Gill?
I don't have much to report out from the past 2 weeks, just been focusing on time with my family, and the kids are doing great at the San Marino Summer Academy. Both kids, one's at the high school level and one is at the middle school. And I have to say, I'm happy to report that both programs are just so great, and the kids are really enjoying them. So love to report that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mrs. Chong.
Thank you. So I attended the grad night thank you party on Sunday and saw a lot of them there, which was a great opportunity to say hello and thank you to everybody who contributed to that. And I also participated in the bond feasibility survey Zoom on June 16th. And I think we'll probably get an update on that. So I won't talk too much about that, but that's all.
Thank you, Mrs. Chong. Mr. Chang.
June 22nd, Thursday, San Marino weekly Rotary Club meeting. They invite Dr. Delatorre and San Marino High School principal to talk about the Medical Art Academy. I think this is a very good speech here and also very informative. So let the San Marino Rotarian and the guests to understand what we're trying to implement And also they also show about the three anatomy table equipment. I think everyone was impressed. Thank you for Dr. Territory for the introduction, yeah, to the notarian. And then the June 23rd, Saturday, San Marino Rotary, they host a Rise Against Hunger. So we spent about 3 hours at the San Marino High School cafeteria. So we have a partner with an outside charity organization. So then they also have about 15 Rotarian, and also our San Marino High School students, they work together, and then they provide a basic the meal packaging, and not just provide the meal to the future recipient, and also I think the most important, take this process that our San Marino High School students to understand how to help the outsider. So then, you know, the Rotary, they buy a lot of rice. So then they need to wet the rice, and also put the vitamin packaging, and then assemble and wet, and then shear. And then the total goal is serve for 10,000, you know, benefactor, yeah.
Wow.
And besides that, I also because I mentioned the Huntington Medical Research Institute, you know, they should open to all the middle school students. So with that, you know, the board member, they was kind of the shock. They know that one of the board member challenged them. So then they have a special section to discuss how they want to serve for high school students. I think they probably were open, not just serve for the Pasadena Unified School District.
Wow.
So it take several weeks, you know, like to I think all the board member focus on this issue, yeah, because usually the board member, they are very quiet, but I think I need to speak out. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. And so for my part, I'm not going to repeat what my fellow board members have already reported. I attended the FAC meeting regarding the feasibility survey on surveying the appetite of the community to see if there is any interest in a potential bond. On the 22nd, I joined Dr. Delatorre, Dr. Lena Rector, and Jason Kurtenbach's presentation at the Rotary. And I'll tell you, at the Rotary, there was a sigh of awe in the room, and they were just so pleased with what we were pushing out for our students in terms of the medical arts. So thank you on behalf of the school board to the Rotary and to PTA affiliates for all of your support in making this a reality for our students. I also continue to volunteer at the Huntington Hospital, and recently I've been taking a course in strategic action. So I'll be able to report out on that in a little bit once I finish. Okay. So anyways, with that, Dr. Delatorre.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the board, executive team. I have had a very busy year, as you all are aware, and so have you. And I just want to express my sincerest gratitude and appreciation for the work that the board does on the daily to keep our community informed and to continue to do the work that is necessary to really represent the San Marino community in the best way possible. And congratulations, Board Member Lamb, for graduating. I wish I would have known that. And she's graduating the Masters in Governance program through the California School Boards Association. And it is a very rigorous program, but it's a wonderful program. And so I'm so happy for you. I wish I would have known, because I do have another congratulations to extend, and that is to Francesca Gill, because she graduated and they sent us her certificate. So I'm sure that
It's coming.
I'm sure that I'm going to be able to present this to you, Joanna, next time around. Yes. And I remember being able to pass this on to Jane when she completed the program. So very happy for you. And I think that this calls for a photograph. If you don't mind. So Francesca, can you come front and center and take a photograph?
I don't remember.
I know, this is great.
I think it was online because it was during the COVID period. I did the entire, yeah, I did the entire thing.
And then also there's in here.
Oh, okay. All right, fine.
Okay, let's see. You let me my glasses. You could hang her. Actually, you get a ribbon too that says picture of. They have a party at TNBA just for me. Oh, that is so. Well, say that. Yeah, they were like super rowdy and all. I was in the workshop. I see what did they do? Very good. Yes.
Right here from center, 1, 2, and.
Thank you. Congratulations.
It was very rigorous. I know it was. 8 for students.
8, it's 10. I'm just kidding.
So there are only, I would say a handful of school districts that have a policy that says that every board member will complete the Masters in Governance program, and we're one of those districts. And I think that that really demonstrates the Board of Education's interest in learning all that they can about governance. And it is just incredible, because that's a high-performing Board of Education that is interested in pursuing that. So congratulations to you. And I would be pleased to do the same for you, hopefully at the next time that we meet.
And I am so glad that the board mandates that, because I felt like it was very valuable information, such a great program that they put on, very engaging and convenient since it's on Zoom, but you still really have a lot of personal connection with the people you take the classes with. So thank you.
Yeah, that's a benefit, because you can also collaborate with other board members who have similar experiences and questions and situations. And so it's always good to make those kinds of connections and build those relationships. And, kudos to you for doing it and completing it so quickly. Thank you. Next, I'd just like to announce that, and many of you already are aware of this, but Daryl Topalian, our beloved principal at Huntington Middle School, has accepted a position in Temple City Unified School District as a director of student services. And this was his dream job. He aspired to be in this position. Unfortunately, we did not have a similar position in San Marino. We're smaller than Temple City. And he, came from Temple City. So for him, it's like going home, and he loves Huntington Middle School. He loves this community. He was so sad to come in and announce this to me. So he, has done a beautiful job for us. And I want to extend my deepest gratitude to him and wish him and Monica well in all of their future endeavors. And also, we have had some turnover at the high school, and that was not as anticipated. So we're going to be addressing that. That's our principal, Jason Kurtenbach, has taken a position at Redondo Beach Unified School District. Literally, his new office is 5 minutes away from his home, so he can walk to work. And Mr. Kurtenbach has been commuting for many, many years, a decade. And it has been quite a commute, especially during the traditional school year when traffic is at its peak. He's accomplished a lot for us over the past several years at San Marino High School. And in my letter that I sent out to parents and staff, I really wanted to acknowledge that. Jason has helped us to move the needle forward at San Marino High School. He worked really, really hard on open access to advanced placement courses for our students. Really took a deep dive into the research, which demonstrates that that is the way that we should be going as a high-performing high school. In addition to that, he was instrumental in moving the teams forward in negotiating a block schedule for next year. The block schedule really is going to allow us to do wonderful things with the Titan Medical Arts Academy. If not for the block schedule, we wouldn't be able to have the partnership with PCC so that their instructors can come onto the San Marino High School campus and teach college level courses in the medical arts for our students during the school day, which is going to be very important for our kids. It will free up some of their time after school to pursue other opportunities. And the block schedule was critical in allowing us to do that. So I want to applaud him for that. Additionally, he worked really, really hard to implement the Medical Arts Academy. He was in all of those meetings, really needed to work hard with his counselors to be sure that we could put the classes together and negotiate with PCC. To provide the pathway. He is also just going to be missed in regard to having those connections and relationships with PCC. So thank goodness his counselors have been working with the same people at PCC. So he has he's been able to do a lot at San Marino High School over the past couple of years, and it wasn't easy. Obviously, leading us through the pandemic, that was a huge, huge burden for a principal to have to lead an entire faculty through transitioning from in-person education to virtual learning. And he did that, and he did it seamlessly and effortlessly. I mean, really, I feel like the high school emerged stronger for having that experience and more adaptable. So I applaud him for that and for all the other things that he has done to help us really move the high school forward. So we are going to be conducting a search to find a new principal who exemplifies and embodies all of the traits and characteristics that we are looking for in a high-performing high school principal. And so we're excited about that opportunity and want to wish him well in his future endeavors. I think that, balancing your professional and your personal life is very important in this day and age. And he's going to be able to do that more effectively now that he's closer to home. So we are going to begin that search immediately, and we will keep the board apprised along the way. Also wanted to mention that this past Saturday, I was privileged and honored to have been invited by the chief of police and the fire chief / interim city manager for 3 more days to attend an active shooter simulation training that took place on the Stoneman school property. It was not just our local law enforcement and fire department that participated. It was also some of the surrounding agencies that were there. And to see them in action brought me a sense of comfort in knowing that they stand ready to defend our children and our teachers against any external threats. They are well-trained, so responsive. They did a fantastic job getting through each of those drills and navigating the corridors and going in and out of the classrooms. And the fire department was charged with, having to assess victims. And so there were some volunteers there who were playing the role of a victim. And determining whether or not, they needed aid or did they move on to the next. And so that's a critical decision. And what the chief explained is they're building muscle memory in doing these drills, because if they can, feel comfortable on a school campus going through these motions and really doing the same thing over and over again, it helps them to instinctively know what to do, how to do it, where to do it, and when to do it. And I appreciate that because not all departments are that proactive. And the truth is, school shootings are happening with more frequency than ever before in our history. And so we have to be ready. We have to stand ready to protect our kids. And we don't want to have to be in that position, but we are in that position. And I want to thank the Board of Education for caring so much about student safety that you have made it one of your goals this year. And that is something that we're going to be working on and taking very seriously. So thank you for making that a priority and for directing us to really work on keeping our kids safe district-wide. Then the last thing I wanted to say is the Facilities Advisory Committee is going to continue to meet monthly. Dr. Lynn has been wonderful in trying to get those meetings set up for the upcoming year, working with Jeff Morse. And we're, as some of our board members mentioned, working with a professional to develop a survey that will go out to our community to assess the feasibility of a potential bond in 2024. We have been meeting with the architects and talking with them about our next steps. So we're very excited about getting stakeholders together and soliciting their input. We had talked before about the 4 A's and getting representatives and stakeholders from each of those 4 A's to weigh in on what their vision is related to our athletic facilities, related to our visual performing arts facilities, related to our science labs, our classrooms. We talked today about the robotics room at San Marino High School being entirely too small, and it really limits the work that can be done in that environment when you're having to disassemble, the robot to get it into the room and work around a limited space. So we really had a great conversation with our outgoing high school principal to kind of download all of the institutional knowledge that he has around the facility and get that in the hands of our architects. So it was very productive, and we're going to continue to educate and inform our community, and we will keep the board apprised. And thank you so much to both of the board members, Shelley Ryan and Jane Chan, for being so actively involved in the Facilities Advisory Committee. We appreciate your service in that regard. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Delashuri. Next, in item 12, it's an informational item. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Lena Richter for the LCFF local indicators update.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the board and executive team. Tonight, I am pleased to provide the board an update on the 2022-23 local control funding formula local indicators. A complete copy of the proposed local indicators has been included in the board packet as well. The purpose of this presentation is to provide a brief overview on the local indicators which are reported on the California School Dashboard each year. Local indicators address the LCFF, the Local Control Funding Formula priority areas for which data is collected at the local level rather than at the state level. And then lastly, to share next steps to address the dashboard local indicators. The State Board of Education offers school district approved standards for the local indicators to support all districts in measuring and reporting their progress within the appropriate priority areas. For the local indicator reporting requirements, school districts determine whether they have met the standard for each local indicator based on locally collected data. Districts meeting standards will receive a MET on the California School Dashboard when these 3 requirements have been achieved. Measuring the progress using locally available data, reporting the results to our local governing board at a regularly scheduled public board meeting, and then lastly, uploading and publicly reporting the local indicators through the California School Dashboard. Doesn't work quite as well for me. There we go. So this slide lists the 8 state priorities that must be included in every school district's LCAP. Of the 8 state priorities, 5 are identified as local indicators in which data is annually collected at the local level. The local indicators are highlighted here in blue font on this slide. They are priorities 1, 2, 3, 6, and 7. Priority 1 is our basic conditions. The standard for this locator is for school districts to annually measure their progress in meeting the Williams settlement requirements at 100% of all of their schools. This includes appropriately assigned teachers, access to curriculum-aligned instructional materials, and safe and clean and functional school facilities. For this indicator, San Marino Unified School District for the last year, 22-23, had 0 Williams complaints received. Therefore, as a result, this indicator is going to be marked as met. Priority 2 is implementation of state academic standards. The standard for this local indicator is for school districts to identify a locally selected measure or tool to track and summarize progress in implementing the California State Academic Standards. Excuse me. The tool selected to measure implementation for the following areas was the State Board of Education approved reflection tool that is included in the LCAP toolkit to measure implementation. For this indicator, implementation of academic state standards for all areas that we see here on this slide were marked at either full implementation or full implementation and sustainability. So as a result, priority number 2 is also going to be marked as met. Next, we move on to priority 3, which is parent engagement. This standard for this indicator is for schools to annually reflect and measure progress that they have made in parent, guardian, and family engagement in the areas of building relationships, building partnerships for student outcomes, and seeking input for decision-making. For this indicator, progress is demonstrated through opportunities we have listed here below: self-reflection, parent, guardian, and California school surveys, which supported perceptions of the following. And for this, we also see full implementation or full implementation and sustainability in our progress as a school district in building parent-guardian relationships and partnerships. The 2023 San Marino Unified School District's California Schools Parent Survey also showed favorable results for the San Marino Unified's efforts in encouraging active partnerships, welcoming participation, and taking parent concerns seriously. Similarly, the staff survey indicated consistent and slightly improved results. Therefore, as a result, the status of this indicator will also be marked as met. Moving on to priority number 6, which is school climate. The standard for this local indicator is for school districts to administer a local climate survey at least every other year that provides a valid measure of perceptions of school safety and connectedness. For this standard, San Marino Unified administers the Cal School Survey not every 2 years, but every year. Results are shown here below. Students and parent guardian data show consistent and slightly increased perceptions overall, particularly in parent guardian perceptions of motivating students to learn. Student data overall also shows us that although more than 75% of students and more than 90% of staff and parents and guardians indicated favorable perceptions of school safety, a slight decrease was noted, substantiating the continued need to focus on school safety. And that's something that Dr. Delatorre just talked about, and our focus and intentional efforts on making sure that happens. As a result, for school climate, this indicator will also be marked as being met. Moving on to priority 7, access to a broad course of study. This standard for the local priority is for school districts to annually measure progress in the extent to which all students have access to a broad course of study as specified in Ed Code. The standard for this is going to be marked as met because 100% of San Marino Unified students continue to have full access to a broad course of study as defined in California Ed Code 51210, which is for grades 1 through 6, and 51220 A through I, which is for grades 7 through 12. All students, student groups, including our English learners, our students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, homeless, foster, students with disabilities, continue to have access, full access to broad courses of study in all subject areas. As a result, this indicator will also be marked as being met. And then lastly, what does this mean for us as a school district? When we look at next steps, we will upload the local indicator data to the fall 2023 dashboard. We anticipate the launch of the dashboard coming hopefully in November or December of this year. We're going to continue to analyze dashboard data to identify areas of strength where we glow, areas of needed growth where we need to grow, and set our goals and our priorities accordingly. We're going to also continue as an administrative team to support our school sites in using data to promote data-driven, standards-based, personalized instruction through strategies such as universal design for learning, project-based learning, constructivist learning opportunities, and so on. We're going to continue to support site activities and programs that increase and strengthen positive school climate and parent guardian participation and engagement. And lastly, once the dashboard is released, we're going to utilize that data to update LCAP goals and actions, and ultimately use that data to create our new 3-year LCAP cycle, which will begin 2020 through 2027. So that is my brief overview of our local indicators, which do have to be approved annually by the school board. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have at this point.
Can we go back to priority 6?
Yes.
Okay, so in the right side, the CSPS, so the last one, safe school 95%, then they have dropped 3%. Can we know what is their concern? They dropped 3%.
So unfortunately, the survey does not seek information as to what their concerns are. It seeks information as to their perceptions of school safety. So for the parent, when the CSPS, that's a California School Parent Survey, that is where parents are asked to express their perceptions of how safe they feel their child is at school. So although our percentages are high, 95%, and that's wonderful, we want it to be 100% every year. And we did notice a slight decline of 3% from last year. So that's why it's going to continue to be a focus area for us. And we see that slight decline, especially in the middle for the staff surveys. And across all 3 surveys, it is the perception of safety.
And then the second question, since this is the data for 2022 to 2023, so I would like to ask Dr. Directori, and when the beginning of June, we do the board strategy review. So for this data, how you think our new update our board goal, we already catch up about what we had to address at this report, no?
Well, this information, right, comes from the survey that is administered during the school year.
It's administered in
Yeah.
March of every
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And so we just recently received
Right.
the data,
Right. So when did we get the data?
about a month ago.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, yeah, we certainly
Yeah.
could look at this.
Yeah.
I will say that the board's goals are aligned
Yeah.
to what we're seeing. So, you are already moving in the
Yeah.
direction
Right,
that you
right.
would be wanting to move in
Yeah.
after having seen this data. So, it's tricky and I think, board member Chan had asked us before, to give all of this data to the board prior to, us sitting down and meeting. The challenge with that is, and I was talking to other superintendents about how do you do this and how can I, do a better job in getting all of this together at once. The data and the information comes to us at different intervals throughout the year. And CAST scores,
Yes.
right?
OPAC.
Always in arrears, which is so frustrating for me because, we get the data after, some of the kids have even graduated.
Correct.
And, there's nothing that we can do in retrospect on that. Well, we can with the younger grades, but not with those that have graduated. So it is challenging and we're going to try to do the best job that we can to
Yeah.
get the board as much information in advance of that. But instinctively, because we're telling you guys what's going on throughout the year at different intervals, you kind of know, right? Because you guys are on top of this already.
Yeah.
And if I may add to what Dr.
Mhm.
Delatorre said, this information has also been broken down by school. The report comes as a district report, and it also comes as a school report, a parent report, and a staff student report. And so the reports for each schools have been put together. And they are actually going to receive it in a data binder. The principal will be receiving that at the beginning of this year. That will include not only CASP, LPAC, iReady scores, but also our school climate data. And they are also going to receive a brief overview, kind of an at a glance of where they did really well, where the perceptions of school safety, parent connectedness are very strong, and areas of where they need to place continued focus.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
think,
site-specific.
I think it's okay. I'm not trying to challenge you. But I think we can for the next year, when we have the 2-day strategy review. So if I think for next 12 months, so in the meantime, we have any data.
Yeah.
So we can put, collect and then
Sure.
when we decide which direction we want to go and
Sure.
then I think
Yeah, so that was sort of leading to my question. Being data driven, I think looking at the different school sites would tell a different story than if we were able to see that broken out, because a high schooler at 18 versus a 5-year-old in kindergarten is going to have a different reason or a different perception. And I have a feeling that might be skewed more these lower numbers towards the older grades. But without the data, I guess we can't actually comment on that. So it'd be nice to see that.
Absolutely.
When we,
Go ahead.
oh, I was just asking when we're going to be having sort of the revisit of our board goals.
So that will start to happen in August.
So maybe kind of looking at that when
Sure.
we revisit it, maybe
Yes.
looking at it with an eye to some of this
Yeah.
information we've
Yeah.
gotten since then might be.
Absolutely. So we're going to repeat the process that happened last year. I'm going to start bringing those action plans because after the strategic planning meeting that we had with the board, we took your goals to a leadership learning summit, and every school put together an action plan that is directly tied into your 4 broad-based goals. And so I'm going to be reporting those action plans to the board. And hopefully what we're doing is we're constantly reviewing and evaluating and reevaluating throughout the year with all of those data points. and the action plans to see, how we're making progress and maybe what we need to be thinking about for the upcoming year.
So then in light of being able to have that report broken down by school site, so maybe if we can have some of that school site information of the survey data as we look at each of the school's action plans,
Mhm.
as Mrs. Gill was saying, it may be a bigger issue at one site than another, and we may not be seeing that in the aggregated data. So that might be helpful.
And is the parent data also broken out by school site? Because I think there is a story in like the delta between the students' perceived safety and the parents, because as a parent, if I didn't feel my kids were going to a safe place, they wouldn't be there.
Right.
But what's happening at school that percentage less, they don't feel that.
Yeah,
So,
right. And a lot of that work will be done by our site leadership teams
Yeah.
in the fall, once they have this data in their notebooks to analyze and kind of digest.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that we're going to start the school year with is safety. And we're going to have the principals lead our teachers in a simulation and a drill. We're going to talk about the terminology and, what every teacher needs to know and how to respond to certain incidents that might come up throughout the year. We're also bringing in a consultant who is partnering with the district and local law enforcement to have a parent safety information evening at the beginning of the school year. We have decided to do that at each of the schools instead of having one big event because it's not one size fits all. And so we're looking forward to that. And we have some pre-planning meetings that Dr. Lynn is working very hard on. And he's going to get our consultant together with the chief of police in July. And we're also putting together a safety video that will be featured on our website. And we're super excited to share that with the board once done. And so Dr. Lynn is going to be taking the lead on that project as well.
I had a further question related
Absolutely.
to what Mrs. Chone and Mrs. Gill was talking about. So for the student survey, is it only given to grades 5, 7, and 9, like the
5, 7,
11?
and 9.
So why are we, maybe I didn't catch it. Why is 6, 8, 10, 12 not involved in the survey?
It's traditionally or historically, the California School Surveys has only been given to those grade levels. So they're trying to capture the students in each of the levels, the elementary, the middle, and the high school.
Okay.
And typically it's given every other year, every 2 years. But we as a school district like to give it every year because we feel more data, the more consistent data that we have, we're able to better put steps and actions into place to address where we need to grow.
Okay.
So it's really important that we have that data annually.
And this is not a survey that we individually developed. This is a California school,
Correct.
California-wide survey that they push out to
Yes.
everybody. So we cannot manipulate the questions. We cannot,
Correct.
really have as much personalization
Yeah.
to the survey that might be more useful to us because they're
We
different.
can't include specific questions we would like to include. Yeah.
And we
Very
didn't select the grade levels they did.
They did.
So it's sort of imposed on us, not.
It's like the
Understood.
test.
Yeah.
We don't test for 9th and 10th and 12th grade. Yes.
Right.
They're getting snapshot data.
Yes.
Yes.
That's where our formative assessments are critical across all grade levels.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions?
You need a motion?
No, this is an information item. All right, next in section 13, action items. Unfortunately, Jennifer, I apologize. I was not able to read correctly. I took action on the superintendent employee agreement right after 3B because I saw it there. I apologize to my fellow board members because I saw A, I saw B, and then I saw employee. And so I that was my mistake, but okay. So do you want me to reread it again and redo it? Okay, thank you. So sorry.
Just to reassure you,
Okay, I will do that.
actually don't really have to, just to let you know, and I want to reassure everybody, the attorney Candace she walked us through how to do this.
Okay,
And
so,
she said, you can.
so I
do
was
it-
right by
Well, okay, so
accident?
you have options with this one, right?
Okay, because it says employee super,
Yeah,
okay.
so you can either, this is what she said, and you can verify this with her. Candace said you can either address it in closed session and report out in open, right? With, report out, or you can list it as an action item in the open session agenda. Have a conversation about it in open. You have to read through the terms of the agreement like you just did, specifically numbering the items and what they are,
Mhm.
because the public has a right to know. And so you've already done that, and so you were reporting out in open, but if you want to do it again,
No, I won't
You know,
have at it. Thank
can.
you.
I actually think we should. do
Yeah,
it,
I-
Just because the way it
Yeah.
falls within the agenda,
Yeah.
somebody may not have,
Yeah.
they may have missed it.
Yeah.
If they thought it was gonna get reported.
So-
as long as the vote doesn't change, I can hear it. 14 times. And it would-
So,
it would be so grateful.
Dr. Choi, because it's an action item, do we want to open up to see if there might be any public people zooming in that would like to? So I would like to offer up another offering if somebody wants to call in to make any comments. Because it's an action item and I did jump it into 3. Sorry.
Okay, President Ryan, we'll go ahead and pause for 1 minute to take any request to speak regarding any action items. If you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9.
Dr. Choi, how many attendants do we have on?
Currently have 12. We have 30 seconds remaining. If you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. Okay, no requests.
So I have a question. So Dr. Cho is, so this collect the public comment is a cover for A to I or
Yeah,
just for
all,
A?
no, all of them.
For all
of-
action
Okay,
items.
yeah.
All the action
So,
items.
so maybe in the future, so when each section, so can mention about, they cover the A to I or,
Well, I
yeah.
think we're only adding it this
Okay.
time to make sure because we were out of order,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
normally.
Yeah, I
the
moved it.
Action items are in the
Mhm.
beginning anyway, right?
It should be when we post, whenever you post.
Okay. You gotta read it again.
I know Jane is enjoying this, but all right, so this is an action item. I would like to repeat it. It's the approval of employment agreement for our superintendent. Tonight, the board is considering the recommended approval of an employment agreement set forth the terms and conditions for Dr. Delatorre to continue serving as superintendent of the San Marino Unified School District. Government Code Section 54953 requires the board, prior to taking final action, to provide an oral summary of a recommendation for approval on the salaries, salary schedules, or compensation paid in the form of fringe benefits of a local agency executive during the open meeting in which the final action is to be taken. Therefore, I am providing an oral summary of the recommendation being considered by the board this evening for a new agreement. Number 1, the term of agreement is for 3 years, and unless notice of non-renewal is timely issued, it will automatically extend by 1 year. Number 2, superintendent's annual salary will be $262,150 to be paid in 12 monthly installments. The superintendent shall also be eligible for increases or decreases as the case may be approved for the district management employee group, including assistant superintendents. The superintendent's work year will be 225 days. With the board's approval, the superintendent may work up to 10 additional days each fiscal year and be compensated for any such additional work days. Number 4, the superintendent will be provided with sick leave and may participate in district-provided health and welfare benefits to the same extent available to other district administrators. Superintendent will also be provided with a monthly car allowance of $570 in lieu of mileage reimbursement for travel within Los Angeles County. The allowance may be evaluated annually based on prevailing IRS mileage reimbursement rates. Number 6, the district agrees to pay membership to AXA, AASA, the San Marino Rotary Club, and the City Club of San Marino on behalf of the superintendent. Number 7, the district also agrees to provide the superintendent with a tablet and/or laptop computer for her use while serving as superintendent, as well as a monthly stipend of $100 for her cellular phone for business use. Number 8, the agreement includes an early termination without cause provision. Under that provision, if the agreement is terminated unilaterally by the board without cause prior to the expiration of the agreement, the district agrees to pay the remaining unpaid salary for the term of the agreement not to exceed 12 months. Is there a motion to approve the superintendent's employment agreement?
I move to approve the employment agreement for Superintendent Dr. De La Torre.
Thank you, Mrs. Gill.
I second.
Thank you, Mrs. Lamb. And so with that, I will do another final roll call. Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Gill,
Aye.
Mrs. Chong,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye. And so the motion has passed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Read it.
You're hired twice.
Time, please.
Yes. All right. So with that, congratulations, Dr. De La Torre. And with that, we will move on to. Okay, so B, board communication norms and protocols. Superintendent Dr. De La Torre will share a summary of the board education's norms and protocols as reviewed during the board retreat in 2022-2023.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the Board of Education and executive team. Everybody should have a copy of our board and superintendent communication protocols in front of them. And by way of background, on June 2nd, 2023, during the second day of the board strategic planning session, we had a retired superintendent who is also a full-time professor at USC and a resident of San Marino, Dr. Maria Ott, lead us in a discussion about board and superintendent communication protocols. During the meeting, we were able to talk pretty extensively about putting together a list of protocols that would be used as a guide for the board and the superintendent in how we go about conducting business throughout the year. Effective governance does make a significant difference in achieving the long-term success of any school board and in any school district. The board and superintendent together are committed to the most effective and efficient working relationship possible for the success of the governance team overall. The adopted protocols really do guide the board and superintendent's work so that all parties are positioned to devote their full attention to the equity, excellence, and achievement of all of our students. The purpose is so that the Board of Education, which is the educational policy making body for the district, serving as leaders in our wonderful community and conducting business during publicly scheduled meetings, to be able to effectively meet the district's challenges. The board and superintendent must function together cohesively as a leadership team. To ensure the collective effectiveness of the team, operating procedures or protocols must be in place. And so this document outlines what those proposed protocols are for the Board of Education. And as we went through and put this together, it was based on the notes that we had taken that day in our session. Also, building on Board Bylaw 9000, which talks about the board and superintendent setting the direction for the district through a process that involves the community, parents and guardians, students and staff, and is focused on student learning and achievement. So if you go to page 3, and I'm sorry I didn't put page numbers on this, where you see the table of communication protocols, I'd just like to briefly take you through each of these. So number 1, the board president will read a statement at the beginning of every meeting that makes clear to members of the public that board meetings exist for the purpose of conducting board business, and all public comments made during the meeting will be heard by the board, but not be responded to as a matter of protocol. So we had talked during our session about the frequency with which we have members of the public who might want to speak to the board about a particular item of concern. And if they're here, they pull a card, they go up to the podium, they say something to the Board of Education, perhaps it's in the form of a question, and they are met with silence because the Board of Education is trained that it's not a town hall meeting, so you're not engaging in dialogue with members of the public. A board meeting is designed to be a meeting where the board is conducting its business in a public setting where the public is able to observe the work that the board is doing, but it's not designed to be able to have conversations throughout the meeting with members of the public. It doesn't mean that the board is going to not hear what the member of the public has to say. It doesn't mean that we're not going to follow up. The board has an opportunity at the end of every meeting, board superintendent discussions, to direct staff to follow up with a member of the public, to do, research on whatever it is and to follow up. We want people to feel heard, and we don't want them to be misreading the situation or feel as though the board is ignoring them. So it was mentioned during the meeting that would be helpful if the board president were to read a statement that really did make that clear. There is something in the agenda now, but for some reason it's, we need to, I think, work on the wording so that it's more explicit and people are better able to understand it. Number 2, individual board member requests for official information shall be routed directly to the superintendent. Boards function best when all members are equally informed, and as such, the superintendent will reply to all board members with email/text questions asked and the responses provided. We had talked about during the meeting the fact that, information is beneficial to everyone. And so if a board member asks a question about the facility advisory committee as an example and what their function is, instead of just responding to that one board member, we would respond back to all board members so that everyone is equally informed. Number 3, any individual board member request that requires other than incidental staff time or any district resources to respond shall be referred to the full board for discussion action. So the full board is able to really evaluate how they want us to spend our time so that it is aligned with the full board's goals and not, maybe a particular board member's interests if they're not aligned with the full board. This is not something that is unique to San Marino, and I don't, see it as something that is desperately needed right now. It's just something that helps to keep the board on the right path toward achieving its collective goals. Number 4, during the board member comment section of the agenda, each board member assigned to a board appointed committee shall keep their remarks to 2 minutes and shall use this time to report on the status of the committees. We had talked about the fact that board members are assigned annually to various committees, and it's important for the full board and the public to really hear what's happening in those respective committees, since we really can't have more than 2 board members serving on a particular committee. 2 of you might be very well informed, as an example, on the FAC, and 3 may not. So to really bring the entire board up to speed on what's happening, it would be helpful to use that time to do that. And if you don't have anything to report out on a particular committee, just to make that reference and then move on to whatever else you have to say.
Can I pause for a second on that
Sure.
one? Why does it say remarks to 2 minutes?
I think that's what we've been saying lately, right?
Mhm.
I don't actually know where that came from. I just know that that's what we've been saying for a while now.
I'm hesitant to
Yeah.
put it in writing on something we're
Mhm.
taking action on.
Mm.
As opposed to it be something that is, because there may be something where we have a longer conversation that may be necessary. And so I think something as appropriate or limited will keep their, I mean, I'm just having that 2 minute.
And I hear you. I think what that is designed to do, by the way, and this
The
is,
communications section,
it's
though.
just, yeah, it's just the communication section. This is why it's in there, right? And there's different time limits in different districts, because I also did a lot of research in looking at what other boards had approved. And I looked at other high performing districts to see what they had approved. And I also looked at other districts that are not high performing.
Yeah, in
And-
action items, we've never held it to 2 minutes. It's always when we are reporting out on what we did, the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So that was the 2 minutes, but we've never stopped anyone in the 3 years you've been here. So it's just a suggestion so that we're just not filling up
think-
just to talk,
Sure. Which would make sense, I think, when we're actually talking. If it's like, when we're saying in the meeting, please keep it limited to 2 minutes, it's one thing, but having it written
Mhm.
down and something we're taking action on,
If
it
you-
ties our hands in a way
May we
that
put
other.
suggested 2 minutes?
Yeah, I think this is where it comes in handy and what other superintendents have shared with me. Not that it would ever happen here, because we're very unique and, but there have been instances, right, where you get someone on the board, this is not San Marino, okay, outside, where they do this filibuster thing, right? And you guys are familiar with what a filibuster is, right? Where they just take that time and they start talking and talking and talking and talking and they don't stop. Now, not that that's ever going to happen here, but right now, if that were to happen, 2 years from now, you have nothing to say that that's not okay.
I'm hesitant to
Mhm.
put something in here that may be misunderstood down the line as a gag order in any way. I understand the sentiment behind it, but I just think putting a number like that in writing on something the board is taking action on
Mhm.
makes me very uncomfortable.
Okay, so, yeah, so let's talk about that.
I mean,
how-
simply
yeah.
writing shall limit their remarks and use the time appropriately to report on. I think that gives us more flexibility on it.
May I make a suggestion for wording for that one? I would suggest taking that clause of assigned to a board appointed committee
Mhm.
and taking that, put it at the end. So during the board member comment section of the agenda, each board member shall keep their remarks to 2 minutes, like whatever we come to,
Mhm.
and shall use this time to report on the status of any committee appointments.
So taking out the assigned to a board member.
It's
appointed
just,
clause,
it
yeah,
just puts
it's
that at the end.
redundant.
So during the board member comment section of the agenda, each board member shall keep their remarks to 2 minutes and shall use this time to report on the status of the committee,
Any committee
And may
appointments.
use this time.
Oh,
and may use this time?
Yeah, but not. 2
Not shall?
minutes. Shall means all you're doing is talking about committees.
It just means you will, no, because you could talk about more than that, right?
in
If you-
addition to whatever
It
your
just
own.
means that you will
update
still
is.
include that.
Yeah,
right?
that's the
Yeah.
time that you
But
would.
if you say that, but once we take that part out, then it's saying each board member shall use this time.
keep their remarks, the comment
Shall
section.
keep their remarks to 2 minutes and shall use this time to report on the status of committee.
So
To
that
me, they're
means
two
then
separate
there's
things.
nothing to say unless you're talking about a committee.
No.
I remember these being a constant battle on the board in the past of may versus shall. And it was always this, I totally remember this because it was like this shall requires you to do it
Yeah.
versus
May is
may
permissible,
is
right?
permissible.
Exactly. And I know that for sure, but to me, this is how I'm interpreting it. I'm interpreting it though, that if you're assigned to a committee, you must report, if you have something to report, you must use this time to report out on that. But if you have more time, you can report on all the other things that you've
They have
done
nothing
too,
to
right?
report.
Yeah. So in having had a couple of trainings from CSBA, some examples that they gave in why we limit discussions to 20 minutes for one subject area is to make sure that the board completes the business and has time to make sure we open it up for comments, public comments. Sometimes in the boardroom, there are physical cards being pulled. So sometimes you have 20 minutes, but the whole activity may take 35 because you've got people pulling cards, you've got people zooming in for an item that is being discussed. And even though we have a time limit, we may or may not get to the end. There were only probably 2 handfuls of meetings where we, almost didn't finish before midnight, but we want to make sure that the business of running the school district is completed. And it is nice to have additional minutes, but we can also say that board members can request for additional time. Like say, for instance, Jane and I are sitting on FAC and we have this big thing to share out regarding the survey. Well, she might take 5 minutes and I might take another 5 minutes, but then we can be flexible with each other, but it shouldn't be every meeting where we are extending our time. The second reason why CSBA also recommends time and allotments is because 5 times 2 to 3 minutes is already 15 minutes, around 15 minutes. And that's just reporting out on the things that we're doing. And sometimes board members, if we are cohesive and we work well together, there's no problem. But sometimes board members might use the platform to admonish, to do other things within the scope of conducting the business. And so they recommended this stuff. If you are uncomfortable with it, we can certainly bring it back and look at the language
Or is-
again.
I suggest if
the
we
number-
add one line, maybe we just add additional time shall be allotted on an as needed basis.
Yeah.
There you go.
Kind of something like that.
As
So,
requested.
yeah,
Not,
Yeah.
as needed, as requested, or I don't know.
I think the base of my discomfort is that we really can only talk about matters in a properly agendized board meeting. So when we start putting time limits on what we are, how much we're allowed to say, and we shall makes this requirement that we have to only talk about those things. It creates these boundaries around literally the only time we are legally allowed to converse around a topic. And so while I understand the need to keep us as a focused board, I do think that's where, President Ryan, you've done a great job of really keeping us on task. And I think everybody's been trying really hard to sort of rope in and corral in the conversation. But I'm hesitant to put these kinds of things in writing because this is something this board does, but we are not the only board members who will be sitting on the San Marino Unified School Board. And once we put this policy in writing, once we pass it, it ties the hands of all future board members.
Until
they
vote
can
on something
they
different,
can
yeah.
review it.
It-
And they
it's
have
not-
another retreat and we
Actually,
do it.
CSBA recommends that we look at this every year.
Yeah.
That we update it every year, depending on, the circumstances and the situation and what we want to do. So it's something that we should be evaluating annually. Is it just the 2 minutes that you're uncomfortable with?
It's just
And-
the 2 minutes and
yeah.
it's that shall, if we strike it.
Well,
I guess my question is this saying that the only thing we're supposed to talk about during the
No.
comment section? Right,
it's
it's
not
not.
how- No.
So this is just when we have the comment section, we should use that time to report on committee.
At a
'Cause I do
minimum.
remember
Yeah,
we talked about.
yeah,
that.
because I mean, don't we all have an interest
Right.
in knowing where
Right.
those committees are at and what's happening with those
Right.
committees, right? That's why you're assigned to a specific committee, right? You're supposed to keep the board updated.
Right.
So if we're not using that time to let other board members know what's happening with the FAC, then, we're not being a good steward of, our responsibilities of representing the board for that purpose. And also, if you think about it, right? If we were to say 5 minutes, right, that's 35 minutes just for that. And it's not the only time that you can speak as a board member. You can speak on every item, right, that is agendized, just like you're doing now, right? We're all talking and having this conversation, and your time is not limited on this. We're looking at it, we're reviewing it, we're discussing it. So that is just the board member comment section of the agenda, and a lot of boards do this. They do report out on the committees. If there's time left over, you talk about other things, but it's saying that you should be talking about whatever's happening with those committees. Maybe there's nothing happening this week.
Then I think we have to leave that middle section in, because that middle section is clarifying specifically about this particular use.
It is in at the end if you put appointments.
But if we strike that entire part out and then we say limited time and shall use, then it restricts you around what you can talk about during the
No,
comment
it
section.
doesn't.
I don't see that. Help me unpack that for me a little bit. I don't know.
Well, if you say, maybe if you read it again, it
Okay.
makes more sense.
Okay, so just to preface it by saying that so comment section is when we can all talk about whatever we want, right? So that's already implied in that board member comment section, right?
Well, is this the board member comment section of each action item, or is this the
No,
communications?
This is the
Should
communication
it say
section.
commu-
So it
oh,
should say the
say
board member
that's where it is.
communication section.
It does,
No,
On the
right?
very top, where it says during the board member comment.
Oh, it should say
section,
communication
board member
section.
Communication
that's where-
section.
Yeah.
That's what's confused.
Okay.
Yeah.
because I was just
Right.
inferring
Okay.
that
Right.
in my head the whole
Right.
time.
Right.
Like you were reading
Okay.
the exact.
This is the early part.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the
This
early
is-
part. Oh,
and-
what were you thinking?
No, that's what I thought, but I think that word was throwing us off.
Okay, so
Okay.
during the board member communications section of the agenda, each board member shall keep their remarks to whatever number of minutes and shall use this time to report on the status of committees assigned,
Committee of
Committees
assigned board. Yeah.
assigned to
Assigned.
committees.
If any.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then we could add the additional time shall be allotted as needed. Which was your suggestion. I don't know. Are you guys comfortable with that?
I am.
Because 2 minutes each is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 minutes, and it's probably going to be more like 15.
Yeah, we have a
16.
student board member
Right.
as well as the superintendent.
Can we go through it all and then make the changes and then not actually act on it tonight and see it all? Is that something we can?
Well,
do?
okay, but my only concern with that is, this is our last regularly scheduled meeting, right, until August. And if we wait until August, and in August, we're gonna hit the ground running. You're gonna have principals, presenting on back to school, and we're gonna be focused on the goals. And I feel like if we can get this done tonight, it'll help guide us all in preparation for the next year.
Then I think leaving it as is, but simply adding additional time if necessary, simply.
Yeah, just can request
Okay.
it. And we've done that in the past.
Striking the middle section out either.
Don't strike anything, just
Okay.
add that they
Add-
can request.
And change the word to
Lobby.
communications.
Right.
So it aligns with
Okay.
ours.
Communication.
Okay.
Go to number 5.
Okay, number 5, uphold the legal requirement for confidentiality on all matters arising from board meeting closed sessions and keep all conversations taking place in closed sessions and other areas restricted by the Brown Act absolutely confidential. And that's just following the law. Number 6, refer all complaints about personnel to the superintendent for handling. We have a board policy that says that. Number 7, the board will inform the superintendent in advance of any items to be discussed at a meeting that is not agendized. So anything that the board plans to bring up that is not agenda is, that's just giving me a heads up. And then the same thing for you. Number 8, the superintendent will inform the board as far in advance as practical about any issue that may arise during an upcoming board meeting. So if the superintendent hears that 10 people are going to come to issue public comment on a particular item, that I would, as soon as I find out about that, give you a heads up that that's coming.
Can we go back to number 7?
Yes.
So with the number 7, how we want to address like each meeting, the last one, the board superintendent discussion item, is that this have a conflict?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think that.
Huh?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't know.
Okay, so
When
Give an
we are
example.
talking about number 7, yeah.
Number
during
7?
the meeting, yeah.
So let's say that number 7 is, you want to bring up something that is not on the agenda, right? And is like, it could be on the agenda. It could be an item that you would normally put on the agenda.
But usually when we talk, we make a comment or we have a question, it's based on the agenda,
Yeah, right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So
I thought that this one also trying to relate to the board
I think it goes
superintendent.
back to what the board always says, right? Which is you don't want surprises, right? And it's hard for staff to be surprised at any time. So it's just being courteous and giving, you know, each other a heads up instead of surprising one another with something that we didn't see coming. That's all it is.
Okay.
do you mean during our own communication section? Because how else would we talk about something that's not agendized?
You guys, I think we're overthinking this, all of us. Like, really, it's just all this is intended to do is, and I don't know how else we can word it so that it's not that.
It's really just to help us stay on the agenda,
Yeah.
but also it helps the cabinet and staff to really be prepared to answer your questions. So
Right.
we had, with COVID and masking and other items that were on the agenda. So that's already on the agenda, the safety. But then all of a sudden you start asking about, well, what about the emergency safety drills, right? That's a little different than a mask. So if you are going to throw something in that's still safety, you should give cabinet heads up and say, I'm also going to talk about the fencing and the gates as well as the masking or whatever. So
it
it
can
gives
be
them opportunity to kind of respond.
Yeah.
I
And
can't think of
it's just, and this is like something that is standard in all of these protocol agreements, not something that we're just making up. So
I don't think it's that we don't think, I don't think it's that it's a matter of being made up. I think it's just a little vague. And so we're just a little confused what the purpose might be.
it's just no surprises, right? And so you're not gonna ask the superintendent, in 1972, what was the, budget amount for instructional materials, right?
Well, we asked the question. We just won't necessarily be upset if you don't have the answer. I mean, because in the course of a conversation, questions do come up and we don't always know where the conversation's gonna go. And I understand the
I
need
would
to
ever,
keep it.
I don't think right. And I don't think if it wasn't anything out of line that I would stop and say, oh my gosh, let's refer to our protocols, right? I'm not gonna micromanage this in that way.
I guess that's why it just seems unclear why it's there. That's all.
Okay, well, it's up to the board. These are your protocols. I don't mind if you want to, strike something, as long as 3 or more of you want to strike something. It's up to you.
I'm fine moving forward.
I'm fine too.
Mr. Ching?
Yeah, I'm fine,
Okay.
but I'm just,
Yeah.
just read a sentence. I have a question, yeah, but I don't think that will have a big surprise, yeah.
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 I don't think so either.
Okay, let's go
Okay.
to number 8. We can always come back.
Sure. Okay, number 8, oh, we've already talked about number 8. That's just me making sure that I inform the board as far in advance as practical about any issue that may arise. That's me sharing information with you to be proactive. Number 9, understand the distinction between the board and staff roles and respect the role of the board as the representative of the community. Number 10, as time permits, visit school sites and attend school functions, but avoid interrupting instruction or interrupting employees at work. Number 11, support decisions of the majority after honoring the right of individual members to express opposing viewpoints and to vote their convictions. Number 12, communicate directly with the superintendent as appropriate whenever a staff member, student, parent, or community member raises a question or concern, and direct people to communicate to the appropriate person closest to the situation. Number 13, contact the superintendent whenever contacted by the media regarding an incident, event, or agenda item. Number 14, represent the board as much as possible by attending each of the 4 schools' events and community functions. Number 15, communicate the common vision and the annual measurable goals. So are there any questions or clarification needed on any of these numbers 1 through 15? No.
So this is an action item. Do we need to make a motion?
And before you do, can I just clarify that number 4, we're leaving it the same, except that we're changing the word comment to communication in the first sentence, and then we're adding an additional sentence at the end that says additional time shall be allotted as needed. Okay.
I move to approve board communication norms and protocol with the change in number 4, comment being communication, and additional sentence, additional time shall be allotted as needed.
Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Lamb. Thank you, Mrs. Gill. With that roll call vote, Mrs. Lamb.
Aye.
Mrs. Gill.
Aye.
Mrs. Chang.
Aye.
Mr. Chang.
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye, and the motion passes regarding board protocols and norms. All right. Next, at this time, I would like to turn it over to Superintendent Dr. Delatorre regarding the CSEA chapter number 120 tentative agreement.
Yes, thank you, President Ryan, members of the Board of Education, executive team. This evening, I am presenting to the board for approval the CSEA tentative agreement with the San Bernardino Unified School District. Included in the tentative agreement are the following articles. Article 3, work stoppage. Article 6, transfer procedures. Article 7, wages and salaries. Article 8, health and welfare. Article 9, hours and overtime. Article 11, vacations. Article 27, longevity. Article 28, terms. This agreement allows a salary increase in the amount of 5%, equal to 5%. And the manner in which CSEA is coming to this amount is that effective July 1st, 2023, all steps will move up 2 ranges or rows, equaling a 5% on schedule increase to the salary schedule, except for range 19, steps 1 through 3, ranges 20, steps 1 through 2, and range 21, steps 1 through 2, range 22, step 1, and range 23, step 1. So the manner in which they're doing this is to move everybody step up 2 ranges again, which is going to equal a 5% on schedule increase for all of its members. This was costed out by Dr. Lynn's accounting staff. So we're very comfortable and confident that this is costly and effective. Item 7.1.2. The district shall provide all unit members with written verification of their salary. This is just a language change. And we're changing the date from February to September 30th. And we already provide them with the information that you see up there on the screen. It's okay. I'm just going to use this copy. Thank you. And then longevity pay. Employees currently receive longevity at different increments on the salary schedule, up to the maximum of 10% on top of the employee's base salary, and that's for 19 years. So with that section, if you'll just go back up, that section used to be in one article that was at the end of the contract. All they're doing here is they're taking the longevity pay and they're placing it under the wages and salaries section of the contract. So there's no substantive change here. It's just, it doesn't make sense to have it separate and not included under wages and salary. Okay, you can go down. Health and welfare benefits. Every year, this is subject to negotiation. And so the changes that you see underlined are new, and then we have stricken through the older outdated language. So the district agrees to provide on behalf of each eligible bargaining unit employee district approved medical, dental, vision, and life insurance programs effective July 1st, 2023. And the district will contribute 100% of employee only coverage. The districts contribute 70% of two-party and family coverage for HMO plans. For PPO single-party plans, the district will contribute the same amount as its contribution to the most expensive HMO single-party plan. For PPO two-party plans, the district will contribute the same as its average contribution options to current HMO two-party plans. For PPO family plans, the district will contribute the same as their average contribution options to current HMO family plans. And so this is effective July 1st, 2023 for the upcoming plan year. Scroll down. Article 9, hours and overtime. We are adding all scheduled minimum days except for the day before winter break will be full work days for all members of the bargaining unit. All scheduled student late starts will be full work days for all members of the bargaining unit. This is really important clarification language for us, because in the past, if we had a part-time employee that was tied to the instructional calendar, an example would be an instructional aide, and we had a minimum day, and let's say that instructional aide works 6 hours every day. On minimum days, when the kids leave, do they go home or do they continue to work? Because we're paying them as though they were there for a 6-hour day, even though the kids leave. We're making it clear here that they need to work the full day because they're being paid the full day, so that there's no ambiguity in that going forward. And for those aides, there's always work to be done. The teachers need support in making copies of things, in filing and doing all kinds of work around the classroom. And so it's really important for us to be able to clarify that. Article 11, vacation. There is some language cleanup here. And you see that we're changing the very affirmative clause that says maintenance and operations and district personnel. It used to say will take their vacation throughout the year subject to the needs of the district, and now it's saying may, to board member Chan's point about may and shall and will. So we're giving them more flexibility to be able to spend down that time. And in a small school district, it's really challenging to get employees to take their vacations because if you have a staffing shortage, there are only so many people to go around, and it's really difficult to give people time off, but we're working on that. Okay. So all of that is just language cleanup. Limitations, we're striking language, we're adding language. And that language is what we've talked to the board about before. Go back up, please. Thank you. Upon completion of the district's fiscal year, 10 and 11-month bargaining unit members shall be compensated for all earned and unused vacation, except those unit members who have not completed 6 months of employment in regular status. And so it's more cost effective for the school district to pay out vacation time in the year in which it is earned, because salaries go up. And you can have vacation that is earned in 2023. And if it's not paid out until 2026, their salary might be much higher in 2026 than it was in 2023. So for us to be fiscally conservative, and we should be as a public school district, we need to have that clause in there, which a lot of other school districts do. Upon completion of the district's fiscal year, 12-month bargaining unit members shall have the option to carry over 10 working days worth of vacation into the next fiscal year. Any vacation time in excess of 10 shall be paid out at the end of each fiscal year. And that goes to the same point that I was just making. Scroll up or down. Any 12-month bargaining unit member who does not opt to carry over vacation time shall receive compensation for all earned and unused vacation time at the end of every fiscal year. And again, we're talking about having the option of putting it into a 403B so that the employer isn't taxed, and it's more cost effective for us to do that as well. Go down. And then the term is being extended through June 2026. And we still have 2 reopeners for each party, which are any articles within the agreement that they decide to sunshine. Salary and benefits are automatic reopeners throughout the year, along with calendar. Go down. I think that's it. And that is it. So there's also a salary schedule attached that represents the changes that we talked about in the first paragraph of the tentative agreement. So with that, I am respectfully requesting approval of the CSEA tentative agreement that is before you this evening for
Mr. Chang has a question.
2023-24. Yes.
Okay, I have a question. Let's go to the 8.1 employee and dependent insurance coverage.
Mhm.
So before in the one party, they choose the HMO or the PPO, they have a different contribution. So right now they set the same contribution, right?
Mhm.
So I mean even the PPO, the school district still give the full amount, right? Or
So for PPO single party coverage,
single,
right? So
yeah.
employee only, the district is going to contribute the same amount that it contributes
to
to the most
HMO.
expensive HMO
Mhm.
single party.
Mhm.
Because if you're on the HMO single party,
You
just
said
pay 100%.
will contribute the most expensive, the HMO mean that there's more than one HMO, right?
We have
So
Kaiser
Kaiser
we
and
have
also
Blue
the
Shield.
Blue Shield.
Mhm.
So then we choose the one more expensive
Uh-huh.
HMO. So then
Because
if they choose the PPO, they will accept the contribution
yeah,
amount.
but the PPO single party might be more expensive
Yeah.
than the most expensive HMO single party.
Mhm.
So the employee is still gonna have to pay that difference.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Still have a different,
Uh-huh.
okay.
So the employer contribution is going to be the same, but if I want the more expensive plan, which is the PPO, then I'm gonna have to pay the difference between what the district will pay
Mhm.
and the premium on the employee only coverage.
Okay, yeah. Makes sense.
You're welcome.
What is the total amount of the impact of this agreement on the budget?
Total amount is, we're gonna do the AB 1200 report. That's gonna lay it out. But the total amount when we did the preliminary calculation is the 5%, when we do the 2 range movements. Which also helps us with the the minimum wage piece. Because the top row is the lowest paid. Top left-hand corner is the number that should not be below minimum wage. By moving two ranges down, which is equivalent to 5%, that also addresses the minimum wage question.
Are we getting the AB 1200? When are we getting the AB 1200?
So we have to,
Go ahead.
notify the county within 10 days of this approval, submit it to the county, and they have to review it for a minimum of 10 days.
So at our August board meeting, we'll have the actual numbers.
Right.
Mhm.
That would be the goal, yes.
And ideally, you'll have them for SMTA and CSEA.
And then the
By then.
budget that we're looking at later, does it incorporate these new numbers?
The budget incorporates this, but not SMTA.
Not SMTA, right?
Yes.
We haven't done that one.
It's a snapshot in time, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any more questions?
With that, may I have a motion to approve the CSEA Chapter 120 tentative agreement?
Go ahead.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mrs. John.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. With that roll call vote, Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Gill.
Aye.
Mrs. John,
Aye.
Mr. Chang.
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye, and the motion has passed to approve CSEA Chapter 120 tentative agreement.
Thank you so much.
At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Lena Richter for approval of the 2023-24 Local Control Accountability Plan, the LCAP.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Delatorre, and executive team. Pursuant to Ed Code Section 52062, the district's proposed 2023-2024 LCAP was presented to the Board of Education during a public hearing at the June 15th Board of Education meeting for review and discussion. Since its presentation, no changes have been made to the plan with the exception of minor budgetary revisions reflecting current actual expenditures. As required by statute, the proposed LCAP requires approval this evening and is therefore being presented as item 13D with recommendation that the board take action to approve the 23-24 LCAP as proposed.
I have one question regarding the OCAP on the top of page 6 of 47. So on the bottom, it shows the page numbers. Yeah, right there at the top of that. So those are our absenteeism rates.
Correct.
Our ADA is tied to our absenteeism. And I noticed it's increasing, and I know that most likely a lot of that is COVID related because of the required quarantine, isolation, and people in general are staying home because they're sick, which they should be. But I'm wondering how we're taking that into account in terms of addressing it because of its impact on ADA and ensuring that that doesn't get higher. I think our ADA is calculated at about a 97.2% ADA based of our enrollment, which is not that number. So, and I know that our audit showed that we had some issues regarding a little bit of some of that. So I'm a little bit concerned and not necessarily looking for action from the staff, but more just saying, you know, that's something I think I would like for us to be able to kind of keep an eye on.
Absolutely. That data is also being disaggregated and shared with school sites specifically as part of their data binder at the beginning of the year. Those numbers do reflect the chronic absenteeism rates for those grade spans. We're also looking at it by grade level specifically. So those are students who have been absent more than 10% of the time they've been enrolled in school. So if they're enrolled for 10 months, if they're absent more than 10 days, they become chronically absent. So that those numbers have been shared with our site principals and will continue to be shared so that they can develop strategies and plans to ensure through PBIS and Universal Design for Learning, web and link crew to ensure that our students are coming to school on a regular basis.
And I do think part of the unintended impact was the hold harmless during COVID. And that with the rolling ADA and all of that, and people not necessarily understanding what that means, there might be a need to do a little bit of education with our parents They used to come down really hard on it. If you missed a day, consider giving the school $50, and it was just this random number, just incentivize people to not pull their kids out for Disneyland, or, adding a couple days for vacation. And I think that might just be something we might want to think about educating our parents on how that impacts our budget.
Yeah, enhance that a little bit more in our strategies through PBIS and web and link to, and our parent advisory committees as well.
Thank you.
And across the state, we have seen numbers for chronic absenteeism rise across the board. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, with that, we need a motion for approval. It's an action item.
To approve the
Thank-
LCAP as presented.
Thank you, Mrs. Gill.
I second.
Thank you, Mrs. Lamb. With that roll call, Mrs. Lamb.
Aye.
Mrs. Gill.
Aye.
Mrs. Chun.
Aye.
Mr. Chang.
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye, and the motion has passed regarding the LCAP accountability plan. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Lin for approval of the 2023-24 district budget.
Thank you, Board President Ryan, members of the Board of Education, Superintendent Dr. Delatorre, and executive team. Item 13E is an action item on the 23-24 proposed budget. You've seen a version of this before, and this is the latest snapshot containing the latest information that we have. I'm going to present this in a relatively quicker way, but I have to do a full presentation because this presentation does go to the county. Slide 2 here, you're going to see that there's a quick recap of how school districts in the state of California are funded, with state tax revenues on the left and expenditures on the right. One of the main takeaways of this chart is, unlike restricted funds, categorical funds, our general funds, there is typically little to no one-to-one matching of revenues to expenditures. So there's no one-to-one matching. On the next slide, Dr. Choi, to develop the 23-24 district budget, we use funding factors that include base grant per ADA and 8.22% COLA, grade span adjustment, a TK add-on, supplemental grant, and we have no concentration grant awards. Slide 4, next slide. We also apply the factors from the dartboard, which includes CPI, pension rates, lottery, and mandate block grant per ADA. I'm moving quickly again, as we have seen these numbers twice before, and this presentation is being recorded for any viewers at home. Slide 5, here are the key revenue assumptions, with the total projected revenue of $48.7 million, which 31.5 million is in the form of state LCFF funding. One of the highlights, which you will also find in the multi-year projections, is the city of San Marino will be increasing its contribution in Proposition A funds from $110,000 to $150,000 for the 23-24 fiscal year. That's going to tremendously help, especially our high school programs, the Huntington Library Program, as well as the Caltech program. Slide 6, on the expenditure side, we have the total expenditures is projected to be 49.3 million, which includes 18.8 million in certificated salaries, 8.1 million in classified salaries, and 11.6 million in employee benefits. Again, I presented this once more because there was a change since the last presentation, in that we were able to code in the cost for these salaries because we didn't have that information, the full information as we have right now. Again, this will change because once we have those staffing changes during the summer, we're going to get a new snapshot to you at the first interim. This is, again, the best estimate that we have right now. Again, we are busy throughout the summer with filling positions for the upcoming school year. Next slide, is slide 7. We're looking at special education needing an additional 4.7 million from the general fund, as well as routine maintenance needing a $1.4 million in contributions from the general fund for the new fiscal year. Slide 8, here are the key components of the ending fund balance, which includes the 3% designation for economic uncertainties, which we had a public hearing earlier, and then there's another action item later to approve. It also includes the assigned amounts as well as the committed funds so that we meet the 10% caps on reserves. Our district is about average in the state in terms of the percentage of funds and the ending balance. Okay, next slide. So finally, as seen twice before since the May revise, we continue to have multiple opportunities to make adjustments to the district budget throughout the year when we have actual data coming in. The projected budget is again a snapshot and a model. Staff will continue to update the board on any new developments. As the budget is also due to the county by the end of June, it is the recommendation of the staff that the board adopts the 23-24 district budget.
Thank you for going through that quickly. I had a question. So, and this is more of a, hopefully a rah rah hooray. So I'm looking at the budget and the multi-year and the proposed budget for 23-24 versus 24-25 and our enrollment projections. And it looks like we're slightly ticking up, which is good news because I do think that we've seen some of deficit spending over the last couple of years, which has been alleviated by some of our reserves. Is it the cautious optimistic outlook that we're going to be maybe climbing out of some of that scenario of deficit spending next year, not this year?
Yeah, this is where ed services and business services, we work very closely, being what, like 10 meters away.
Yeah.
And we've been going back and forth, especially since enrollment is still coming in.
Right.
You know, we're still in the enrollment
Yeah, I
process.
noticed it actually went up.
Yes.
From even 10 days ago.
It's the latest snapshot.
We're at over 2,800.
Yes. And the thing is, one of the benefits is, as you know, Dr. De La Torre mentioned earlier, we do have phenomenal programs that we're rolling out at light speed.
Yep.
And this is, you know, we are a small district, we're very nimble. And, you know, it's essential that we create the programs that meet the needs of our students. And I think that would attenuate the attrition and increase it enrollment.
We're going to be cautiously optimistic and stop saying we're in declining enrollment. We've sort of just leveled. Is that safe to say?
It takes leadership from the board and from our superintendent to buck that trend. I'm looking at data and I'm seeing that trend. Now, a lot of other things could happen. Right. But the trend is indicating that we are leveling off in terms of the decline and with the goal of increasing. When we get the CBEDS numbers in early October, we're going to break out the TK kindergarten rolling up.
Yeah.
Also because we have the UPK, the ECHO 48,000 section C requiring that the TK start age is moving up.
Right.
So that also contributes to the increase in enrollment, but at the same time, we're going to break the enrollment projections, the TK kindergarten up. In the past, we didn't have to do that because the numbers kind of all worked out identically. But now we're
Yes,
going to
probably
have.
by next year, we'll be taking them in their diapers when they're two. And we'll be able to take them in. Yes.
They're getting smarter and smarter.
Yes.
Kudos. That's a big accomplishment because so much narrative in the public and especially in California is declining enrollment. And I think we're always in the shadow of LAUSD and our families and community members always hear that and get worried for us. But I think we really need to push that message out because as we want confidence that's rightly placed. And I do think that that is rightly placed confidence. And it is, like you said, because of all of the work that's been done and will continue to be done. So that's great.
And I
news.
think what we will do is we're going to have Dr. Richter do a presentation on enrollment in August, where we'll be better positioned to really talk about our strides that we've made. So
I'm excited to see the
Yes.
kindergarten numbers.
you.
Yes. Right now it is fluid. Parents are continuing to enroll and it's really exciting to see that, particularly in the lower grades. And we are seeing it in the middle and high school grades as well. So that's exciting. And we're very much looking forward to presenting the enrollment update in the fall.
Yeah,
great.
All right. Dr. Lynn, you also need a motion for the approval of the San Marino Unified School District budget. May I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mrs. John.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. So I would like to do roll call. Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Gill,
Aye.
Mrs. John,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye. And there is unanimous decision on approval of the 2023-24 budget.
And can I just say that I want to express my appreciation to Dr. Lin. This is actually a significant milestone for him because this takes him through the full budgeting cycle, right? This is his first full year of being a CBO, right? And so he's gone through the full cycle now, and the budget will then go off to LACO and he will start all over again. So how do you feel, Dr. Lin? Do you feel?
I feel indebted to my team and to the leadership of Dr. Delatorre and to the board.
Thank you. You've done a great job and we appreciate you. And I know it's hard work. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lin. All right, at this time, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Lin for the audited financial statements as of June 30th, 2022.
Thank you, President.
22 or 23?
21, 22.
Two.
So
Okay.
at any point in time, we have three different budgets we work with. One is the unaudited actuals, which we audit and then we make it actual. One is the budget that we have currently that lives and breathes, right? It's alive. And then one that we project out. Actually, what we do is we project out 3 more years. But what we're doing here is this is the audited actuals from 2 years ago, from the 21-22 school year.
Thank you.
And item 13F is an annual routine item for the board to approve the 21-22 audited financial statements. We needed a few additional months this year because our veteran board members would know that this usually gets approved around, January, February. But the 21-20 school year was a very different year because we had the pandemic, we came out of the pandemic, and the state said, if you do the independent studies program, then you're held harmless in terms of data. But then when they came back and they said, no, you need the data, you need artifacts, attendance information, et cetera. We had that information, we just needed to compile. We needed more days or more time to compile that information in order to qualify for the 3-year averaging of ADA. So with that said, I would like to invite Gemma Patasinski, who is the Principal Assurance Officer with Clifton Lawson Allen Auditing Firm, to the podium to go over the independent audit report.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience and for waiting the entire evening.
That's okay. Thank you, Dr. Lin, members of the board, administration. I'm Gemma Chashinsky. I'm a principal at CLA. And actually, I'm filling in, just full disclosure today, I'm filling in for Taylor Ulrich. He is actually responsible for the audit this year. Education code requires that the person responsible for the audit rotate after every 6th year. And so I actually rotated off this year. I was not involved in the audit whatsoever. He had a conflict this evening, and rather than pushing the presentation 2 more months into August, I said, what, I'll come in. I think it's okay if I just come and talk, since I didn't have anything to do with issuing the opinion. So it's nice to see those of you that are familiar faces, but I am going to work through the report and hopefully answer any questions. And if I can't, Dr. Lin might be able to, or Taylor can always circle back and answer questions that I can't. And so just to recap on our responsibility and our purpose for that audit, it's to issue an opinion on the financial statement so that the informed reader can feel comfortable about relying on the information. And there are a lot of requirements to have the audit. The education code, the CDE has their guidance, and the Education Audit Appeals Panel guide. And then, of course, because you receive federal funding, the Office of Management and Budget also requires a single audit. So we're looking at your federal programs as well. And of course, there's the fiduciary responsibility to continue reviewing, as you do on a regular basis, all of the financial information. So just a quick recap on the audit process. So this is a risk-based approach. Of course, naturally, we can't look at everything, every single transaction that occurs during the year. But the process it starts with the risk assessment and, inquiries with management. We always sit down and meet with somebody on the board. We do some analytics, and from there we do a review of the internal controls. We're not auditing them. We're not issuing an opinion on internal control, but we do have to look at those key significant areas of that kind of roll into the financial statements and do at least a walkthrough of the internal control, understand what those controls are, so that we can, form our decisions about what tests we're going to proceed with in terms of the financial audit. So what transactions, what account balances, what are we concerned about? What do we need to look at? And some of the key areas we always focus on: revenue recognition in our profession. That is just a given that, revenue is a significant area in terms of the audit. So we're always looking at that. We're always looking at your key account balances, confirmation, with the county. That's where all the money is. And then other significant account balances and transactions. And then we always have to add an element of unpredictability. And this year there was a new standard related to leases, operating leases, and whether you needed to record them in the government-wide financial statements or not. So we did some additional testing associated with lease revenue and lease expenses. And then the results of all of those procedures then come to the conclusions on our audited financial statements and the governance letter that was included in your packet as well. And so what are those results? So our firm has issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. So that means that the informed reader, they can rely on the financial data to make decisions. So it's a clean opinion. It's the best opinion we can render. We didn't have any significant changes in scope of the audit. So we have to, if we have to really redirect our focus, I would say the only thing that did come up was the independent study and having to, audit that because it hit the threshold requiring audit. But there were no significant changes to accounting policy. So the new lease standard didn't really impact you. Nothing significant there. And really in the financial statements and the full accrual financial statements, so not your unaudited actuals, but the conversions that happen as part of issuing this report. Really that biggest estimate is your STRS and PERS. And so the information in the financials comes directly from both STRS and PERS and their actuaries. We rely on that data to report here. And those have, pretty significant swings from year to year. So those numbers kind of, the liabilities go up and down based on those actual assumptions and your proportionate share compared to everybody else in those programs. And then other communications, we didn't have any difficulties or disagreements on accounting policies. There were 6 adjustments. You do see those in the audit report. We didn't have any adjustments that we recommended that were not recorded. The audit adjustments really focused on year-end closing accruals. So some liabilities that were over accrued and some revenue that was under accrued, just based on cutoffs. So, if something is earned as of June 30th, do you record it as revenue and a receivable or not? And same with liabilities, things that maybe are not expenses until the next period shouldn't be recorded. So there were a number of items. And so as a result, whenever we have adjustments, we have to consider, how do we report that? Is it a material weakness? Is it a significant deficiency? Because there were so many and they were significant, we did issue in our letter that it was a material weakness in terms of that closing process. And so management in the report has provided their views and their response and how they're going to work towards correcting that during this year's close. And then we had one state compliance finding related to independent study. When we did the work in that area, there were a couple of master agreements that were missing the required, I think it was the required signatures, or the master agreement wasn't available. And then let's see, there's a calculation that is done in terms of the ratio. How many students to teachers do you have in independent study compared to in your regular attendance? And so that ratio did not meet the requirement. And as a result, if the ratio is too high, then you have to reduce your ADA and how much you receive in funding associated with that ADA. So there was an adjustment related to that and a finding associated with that. All right. I did mention, we look at your unaudited actuals. So that's what you're familiar with. That's what management has brought to you earlier last year. And then of course, there are the government-wide full accrual financial statements that have to be presented as part of the audit report. And so there's just a snapshot on the board. You'll find that in the financial statements. And really the biggest differences are in the long-term liabilities associated with the changes, the swings in the liability for pensions. And so that impacts the balance sheet. And then it also impacts the statement of activities. But in both on your fund statements and on the government-wide statements, you did have a positive change in net position. All districts received a lot of categorical funding in 21-22. Not everybody used all that money. So there was quite a bit of money there as a result. And then finally, the trends, you should be familiar. This is, information you're receiving as part of your unaudited actuals as well. Our focus here is just making sure you're hitting that reserve requirement so that we don't have any concern in terms of reporting as not being able to report as a going concern. So you've hit that mark. And I know that's something you monitor and look at as you look at the interim reports and the estimated actuals. And then as part of our audit, the federal part, we issued an unmodified opinion on compliance. So there were 2 federal programs that we tested, child nutrition programs, as well as the education stabilization funds. Most districts still have a little bit of that money maybe being used up by this year. And so we're required to audit that every year. OMB has said this is a high risk area. And so we have to audit it, even though we had done an audit of it the prior year. But there were no findings associated with the federal audit. So clean opinion on that and no issues in terms of internal control. And then on the state programs, if you're interested in looking at the long list of requirements from the state, that's on page 82. We've got an unmodified opinion on compliance. However, we do have the independent study finding that's in the report. And there were no prior year findings to report back to you on. So with that, I'm happy to try and answer any questions. And I told Taylor, I said, your name should be up here, not mine, but, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions. And I have to say, this is the first year I've come in here and it's been empty. I was really surprised.
It's because you're normally here in January, February, and this is still almost July. So.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
not
usually
quite
there's a
July.
lot of student presentations or awards and things like that.
So Gemma, I have a question for you, and I'm sure the board might have questions as well, but related to the finding on the independent study, I have to assume that other school districts are struggling with the same thing because it was such a challenging, difficult time. And we were just trying to get kids, enrolled in either in person or independent study. And so I'm just looking to you because whether or not, this is not a unique issue related to San Marino, right?
No,
other districts are.
It's not. I would say it's probably a common finding last year was related to independent study. I think many times related to the short-term independent study, because that's traditionally not what most districts had operated under, was just the long-term. So you have better processes in terms of having the agreements in place and knowing how to operate. On the short-term side, it was a lot more difficult because it's at every site, maybe not at an independent study location. And so districts had a harder time kind of corralling everybody at those sites to do all the right things in terms of the getting the agreements in order. And I think the other big difference is that the new rules kicked in with the synchronous, nobody was used to doing that. And then having to try and schedule and make sure you could demonstrate, like we could see, okay, well, how did you offer your synchronous instruction and was it occurring? So that was definitely new too. And there were so many more students in independent study everywhere. It definitely grew quite significantly for 21-22. I don't know what we'll see in 22-23, but yeah, no, that was a fairly common. I would say that's one of the more common findings this last year for sure.
Thank you.
Can you refer to page 385? The numbers, page 385 in the bottom.
His page 385.
Slide presentation.
I think it's 86. In the middle, they have a number, it's 86.
It's the page 86 of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Of the
audit report.
report, okay.
Yeah.
Nope, that's not it.
All right.
Mm-mm.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the section 1, financial statement, the question 2, internal control over financial reporting. So they're asking material weakness identify, they put a yes. So then the next page, they mentioned about there's 3 account. So can you explain more about what is this issue?
So this is related to kind of the year-end closing and kind of timing of when you're closing the books and whether you accrue a receivable or a payable. And so in this case, there was some revenue that was related to 21-22 that was not set up or recorded as a receivable, even though it wasn't received until a little later, maybe in July, August, September. It really related to 21-22, so it should have been established as a receivable and a revenue in the year. So lottery, there's an estimate usually that happens for fourth quarter lottery. That was not set up. There were some developer fees that I think came in or that were due to the district that wasn't recorded. And I feel like there was something else in here. Summer school rent. So there's maybe part of that summer school is related to through June 30th, and then the rest is for the rest of the year. So the part through June 30th would be what you would accrue in your financial statements. And then same on the liability side, there were a few items in here related to debt service due. I don't know if this was the interest payment due like in August, but it was recorded as a payable. It's not due and not recorded on the modified accrual financial statements until you pay it in August. So there were just a couple things like that, just timing differences of when to record things.
And then the same page, what is how many category when you audit they like qualify as a low risk audited or they may have a high risk. What is the difference?
Okay, so low risk auditee, we looked 2 years back and we looked to see that there's an audit's occurred that you've issued an unmodified opinion that you don't have any material weaknesses, that you don't have any federal findings. And those are kind of the key things. And so then going forward, we'll look, and I will have to double check if the material weakness on the financial statement kicks you into high risk, or if it was just if you had a material federal finding. And off the top of my head, I'm not remembering exactly. So, but the difference between low risk and high risk is the level of testing we have to do. So if you're low risk, we only have to test 20% of expenditures, federal expenditures. If you're high risk, we have to test 40% of federal expenditures. With the COVID funding coming in, we were testing way more than 40% because we had to test CRF. We had to test the ESSER funds and the GEAR funds. But in a normal year, when you don't have all this additional funding, it really does make a difference because generally most programs are not deemed high risk by the federal agency. So you only test the big ones every 3 years. And so the low risk, high risk can really affect how much work you have to do in terms of the testing.
So one of the reason I asking this question, because next year we may have a bond. So when you go to the bond, they probably they will check the rating. And then what is the issue is that your audit report, the content may refer to the rating.
Yeah. I'm not sure if the rating, and I don't know, because I'm not involved in rating. I think the focus is generally more on your general fund stability.
Mhm.
That's my understanding
Right.
from speaking to folks, and not so much because this is for the federal audit. This is just for the federal program audit. I think the rating agencies aren't too concerned about that. They would be concerned if, say, we had a going concern issue in the report. And of course, if you're not hitting your reserves, if you're not projecting, I think those are the things that they tend to focus on, but I'm not in that business, so I don't know 100%. And you guys might know better just from working with the
But
bond rating agencies.
Overall, we have an unmodified opinion, right? So can you just reinforce what that means?
Sure. So that means that, when the bondholders, whoever's reading the report, an informed reader, so somebody that has a, finance background and has some idea about what they're looking at, they can look at the financials and they can feel comfortable about the numbers that are in here. It lets them then form their decisions. So, the report doesn't tell them how to make decisions, but it says, okay, if I look at this and this report says, fund balance is X amount, I can feel comfortable that that's truly the fund balance number. So that's what the unmodified opinion, the clean opinion. There are other opinions. We could have an exception. So where years ago, when long-term debt or when fixed assets were not on the financial statements, we always had a paragraph that you could, that it had this exception. This was one thing that was not in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. You can have an adverse opinion where you say, oh, hey, everything looks great, but I don't give an opinion on your long-term debt because I can't audit it. Or you can have a disclaimer, you just say, this is such a disaster, I can't even give you an opinion. So unmodified is that's the best opinion you can render.
Thank you.
All right, any other? All right. Okay. With that, I need a motion to approve the audit financial statement as of June 30th, 2022.
I move to approve the audited financial statements as of June 30th, 2022.
Thank you,
Second.
Mrs. Gill. Thank you, Mr. Chang. With that roll call, Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Gill,
Aye.
Mrs. Chong,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
I,
Mrs. Ryan, aye, and the motion passes for the audited financial statement. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gemma.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. You too. Drive safe.
At this time, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Lynn for resolution number 13. Resolution number 13, sole source student transportation vehicles. It's recommended that the Board of Education adopt resolution number 13 to authorize the district to sole source purchase orders to Fullerton Ford Orange County Car Dealership without formal public advertising and receiving of bids for the purchase of limited supply,
Hard to find.
hard to find. Limited supply Ford Transit passenger vans on an as needed basis for educational use. Dr. Lynn.
Thank you, President Ryan. Item 13G is an action item to adopt a sole source resolution to purchase Ford Transit passenger vans from Fullerton Ford without formal public advertising and receiving of bids. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve Resolution 13 for the purchase of 2 additional passenger vans needed by San Marino High School for curricular and extracurricular activities.
I have a question regarding the cost. So I know that the San Marino High School PTSA allocated some funds. So the difference between what they allocated and what the cost will be, that money is coming out of our transportation or general? Where's that money come from?
So it's $72,000, slightly below $72,000 per vehicle. And we have currently already secured and purchased one of these vehicles. There are 2 more in inventory and they're going to be disappearing very quickly. If we don't purchase them, then we most likely will have to do another sole source with another vendor. Now, Dr. Richter and I, we've been brainstorming today as to how we can make up the difference. PTSA has very generously allocated $110,000 in total. That doesn't buy us 2 vehicles. It gets us a vehicle and a half. So we will have to come up with a difference. We do have the one-time discretionary arts music block grant. It's discretionary in that we can use it towards a purchase like this. We have $550,000 in that budget within the, you're gonna see it on the MYP, the arts music discretionary block grant. I was looking at the update from the state today. The governor and the legislature, they're still talking about the total amount that's going to be allocated to that discretionary block grant. The governor proposal was to cut it in half, and we got half of it. The other half is still up in the air. Instead of 33 billion, it's like 31 billion, which is better than half of 33 billion. So we're crossing our fingers. If we don't have enough funds in that, 550,000 is a lot of money, but we're gonna have to figure out how to do this from that discretionary block grant. If we don't have that, then the alternative is to work with ASB later and see if the students in ASB will vote towards funding the difference. ASB has a lot of carryover that has created an issue with our FDIC earlier this year when we had to create Fund 8. Money that's raised by ASB within the year has to be spent within that year for those kids. Cannot be carrying over unless it's like yearbook. They put the money up front, they spend it at the end of the year. But we shouldn't have these year after year carryovers that also affect the way we report.
Dr. Lin, was it budgeted like insurance, driver, how we're going to make it equitable for use? How was that handled?
So insurance is covered through our JPA. We reached out to them. It's a pretty simple process. We do have, work vans. When we purchase a new work van, we send it into the JPA. JPA sends us as a document that says it's secured. And now in terms of use, the liability end first and foremost is we have to do a background check on the driver, which is an employee, a qualified district employee or employee of the high school, which is a district employee. So that background check has to be done. The student cannot be alone in the vehicle with the driver. Okay, so that's another rule we have in place. Parental permission has to be secured and available. Parents will have to sign before we let the student be in that bus or in that in that passenger van. In terms of equitable use, this is going to be handled at the site level. The request has come in from the site needing up to 5 vehicles. Right now we have funds to realistically purchase up to 3. And when we get 5, then the equitable use would be much easier because then the capacity is there. The whole goal of this, in my understanding, when the principal at the high school presented this to me months ago, was they were spending so much money on transportation to the point where we could easily break even if we were to invest in this. And we're talking about general fund that they were spending. So there are 2 ways we approach this. We cannot use Prop A dollars from the city, even though they're increasing at 40,000. That's going to help defray the overall cost of transportation. The second thing is, even though the high school is purchasing this, if the middle school needs it and there is capacity and availability, why not, right? And then we could look into the same model and the same setup. The limit is you can only have 10 seats, including the driver. Beyond 10 seats, then it's a Class B license, which complicates the whole matter. So we are unique in this, relatively unique as a small district. Any district that's larger than us will get those yellow buses with 54 seats with a Class B license. Smaller districts don't really need transportation. We are just at a level where we do have a lot of activities, extracurricular and curricular, to the point where we're spending a lot on transportation. And this is an idea to curtail that expenditure and reduce the impact on general fund. And PTSA is helping towards that regard. I don't know if that answers your question about equity.
Motion?
Yes, I do.
Move to approve resolution number 13, sole source student transportation vehicles.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Chong. Thank you, Mrs. Gill. With that roll call, Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Gill,
Aye.
Mrs. Chong,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye. The motion has passed for resolution number 13.
Getting it.
At this time, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Lynn for resolution number 14. In resolution number 14, this is the delinquent tax program renewal. It is recommended that the Board of Education adopt resolution number 14 to approve the assignment of delinquent tax receivables to the California statewide delinquent tax finance authority for fiscal years ending June 20 in each of the years 2023, 2024, 2025, and to authorize execution and delivery of related documents and actions.
Thank you, President Ryan. Item 13H is a routine item in the sense that every 3 years we bring it back to the board. Our district is part of another form of JPA. It's called the California Statewide Delinquent Tax Finance Authority. So a JPA is a consortium of sorts. And this agenda item is to approve the assignment of delinquent tax receivables to this JPA, the California Statewide Delinquent Tax Finance Authority, and to authorize the execution and delivery of related documents and actions. Therefore, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve Resolution 14 and authorize the execution and delivery of delinquent tax receivables to the California Statewide Delinquent Tax Finance Authority, JPA, for processing.
Board, do you have any questions, or this is a,
I move to approve.
thank you, Mrs. Gill.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Chung. Roll call, Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Gill,
Aye.
Mrs. Chung,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye, and the motion to approve delinquent tax program renewal number 14 has passed. Next, I would like to turn it back over to Dr. Lynn. Probably want to get out of that seat for the certification of the district's reserves for economic uncertainties disclosure report 2023-2024 under item I, certification of the district's reserves for economic uncertainties disclosure report 2023 to 2024 in accordance with Education Code 42-127A to B. It is requested that the Board of Education certify the district's reserves for economic uncertainties disclosure report.
Thank you again, President Ryan. 13I is a routine action item for the board to certify the disclosure report on the district's reserves for economic uncertainties. We had a public hearing earlier this evening, as well as a budget presentation that mentions the reserves. And there is, however, a typo in the last word, which should say report and not resort, even though that.
I did say report, though.
Okay.
I did not say resort, even though I saw it.
Even though this last action item, we all really would like to go to a resort. So that it is the
Okay.
recommendation to approve this
So
report.
a motion to go to the resort on this report. All right, do I have a motion, please?
I move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Chang.
Second.
Second, Mrs. Jones.
Oh,
All right.
that was Miss Gill.
Ms. Gill. Roll call, Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Gill.
Aye.
Mrs. Chong,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye, and the motion for district reserves for economic uncertainties disclosure report, not resort, 2023-24 has passed. Next, 14, item 14, board superintendent discussion items.
I have a question.
Uh-oh,
I thought you.
is it
might-
on the agenda?
You know,
It's okay.
No surprises, Mr. Chang.
Can't surprise her.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
Okay, so the last time we send the postcard about a legacy permit to the senior.
Mhm,
So I would like, we don't have to answer right now.
mhm.
Is that do we have a collect some response or nobody?
I asked that question recently when we were in a meeting
Yeah,
looking at
yeah.
enrollment, class sizes and the number of sections we need in each grade level. And we have had a lot of phone calls,
Uh-huh.
according to Claudia, on that postcard. So we're still, waiting, and I don't know the number and she wasn't prepared to give me an exact number. But I think you're gonna hear more about that in August when we
Yeah.
do our enrollment report.
Yeah,
But she did say, you can verify that
Yes.
Yeah.
lots of phone calls, so.
okay, so you can collect the data,
Yeah.
come out a brief report.
Sure, absolutely.
So then we can see how the community responds
Mhm.
on this and also may affect to the enrollment, yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
That will be part of our reporting in the fall for
Yes.
enrollment.
I wanted to say something. Because knowing we were talking about the principals, I didn't want to bring anything up, but then once you brought it up and sort of responding to some of that, I'm trying to think how to say this in a way that I'm not talking out of turn on the agenda. I just want to, I know that we're looking at the principals, and potentially hiring, but we don't have a board meeting scheduled in July, so potentially we will be adding a board meeting in July.
There is potential for that. And so I will be working through the president to see if we can schedule a special meeting. I just don't have the timeline on that right now because the Director of Human Resources is still on vacation, not returning until next week. So once I get that timeline, I'm going to contact Board President Ryan and ask her, because I don't know what vacation schedules are like. But I'm going to make sure that I am informing the Board of Education as to what the timeline is. And what our steps will be. And so we can look at vacation schedules and see if you're all available in July for a special meeting for that purpose. The alternative to that would be to ratify the employment on the next regularly scheduled meeting, which is August 8th. That's done. But and that would be as a last resort. I would though be keeping the board apprised of who, what, why, when, where. So again, no surprises, right? So you would know all along what the district is doing and who we would be bringing on board.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, with that, I will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.